Just so all of you young people in my family will know that my priorities are always straight, I would like to let you know that on, what date was this anyway? June 30th through July 5th, 2009, along with my young son Kyle and Bob Buchanan, went to the Congressional Country Club for the AT&T National Golf Tournament sponsored by none other than Mr. Tiger Woods. So we've seen Tiger Woods in action in real life. As he was walking up the 17th fairway, he stopped at a porta potty, and when he came out, he got a standing ovation, and he also won the golf tournament. I'd like to tell you the story about my romance and how we got married. I came home from my mission in September of 1965. I was home 6 days and then had to get to college. It was late in September. I went down to Dixie College, immediately met Carolyn, probably the first week I was there. Within a month or so, we started to date and dated the rest of the year. So then the summer of 1966, I went home to live with my parents in the summertime back in Salt Lake City. And it was in June, I went to the temple with my ward. We went in the Salt Lake Temple. They put us in the chapel. We were there for probably 45 minutes. And so I was sitting in the back and had some righteously whispering experience with Bishop Mix. And he shared with me that when he married his wife, he decided that he wanted to have David O. McKay perform the wedding. And so he'd call down to President McKay's office every day, and they would say he's not available. And so he wouldn't agree with that. So the next week he would call down again, and that went on for a month or two. And the secretary got a little bit annoyed with him, he said. And then one day, the phone rang, and it was Claire Middlemiss, who was the secretary to David O. McKay. And she said, "Is this the Robert Wayne Mix that keeps calling down to the church office building wanting to know if David O. McKay can perform his wedding?" He says, "Yes, that's me." And she said, "This is Claire Middlemiss, President McKay's secretary. His schedule has changed and he is available on that day." So he had the privilege of having David O. McKay perform his wedding. Well, I went home after that temple experience thinking about that, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to get President McKay to marry us. Carolyn and I had become engaged in June and decided to be married on September 16th, 1966. So I went home and prayed about it and thought I would get President McKay to marry us. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's not going to happen. President McKay's 93 years old. He's kind of feeble. So I thought that's not going to work. Then the next day or two, I just happened to be downtown Salt Lake, drove by the church office building, and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I had revelation on the spot. I'm going to go get a general authority to marry us. So I pulled into the ZCMI parking lot, walked across to the church office building. Security then wasn't like it is today. I walked upstairs and I saw names like Spencer W. Kimball, Mark E. Peterson, and other general authorities. I thought, no, that's not right. That's not right. And finally I came to the door, and on it said LeGrand Richards. I thought, exactly, that's who I should get. He set me apart from my mission. And so I'm going to get him. Well, the mistake I made, I walked, the door right there said LeGrand Richards, but you're supposed to go through the door on this side, which would route you through the secretary. And if you could get past her, then it would take you into his office. But of course, I didn't know that, so I just opened up the door that had his name on, walked in, and there LeGrand Richards was talking on the telephone with his elbows on the desk, probably talking to President McKay for all I know. And he looked up and saw me and he said, "Come in, come in, come in, come in." Then he pointed for me to sit down, so I sat down in front of his desk and he finished his conversation. And then he turned to me when he hung up and said, "Well, young fellow, what can I help you with?" And I said, "Well, I've got problems. I'm in love and I want to get married. And since you set me apart from my mission, I thought it would be proper that you perform our wedding." And he said, "Oh, I love young people who are in love." And he took the next 45 minutes telling me all about romance and love and how to live happily ever after. So he said, "What day do you want to get married?" And I told him September 16th, 1966. He called the secretary into the office with a calendar to see if he was free that day. And it turned out that he was free. So he said, "I'd be glad to do it, but call the secretary 2 or 3 days before just to make sure my schedule hasn't changed." So I went home. I couldn't get out of his office fast enough. I laid rubber in the parking lot and dashed over to Carolyn's grandmother's house where she had been staying for a week and told her what I had done. She couldn't believe it. I said, I did it. We're going to be married by an apostle. So on September 16th, I showed up to the temple by myself, and the people that came to support me was my grandmother Tripp. Grandpa Sampson showed up, my grandpa, George A. Sampson, but he wasn't able to come in. And a friend of mine named Clarence Crosby, we called him Bing Crosby. And then Carolyn's mother and her Aunt Phyllis, and I think maybe my bishop. And that was pretty much everybody that supported us. We had people supporting us outside the temple, but none of them could come in the temple. So we were married on September 16th, 1966 by Apostle LeGrand Richards. Interesting. Elder LeGrand Richards gave us some great counsel, and in 1981, 66, 76, so that's 15 years later, I decided to write him a letter and thank him and give just a report of what had happened. And so I wrote this. I said, "Dear Brother Richards, I am just reporting in. On September 16, 1966, it was our privilege to have you perform our marriage ceremony in seating room number 1 in the Salt Lake Temple. We've reflected over the years on that experience and of the counseling that you had given to us. You mentioned that you and your companion had been sealed in that same room some 50 years previous, and you shared with us some very special thoughts. The counsel that I remember most was you told me that if the time ever came that I only had a nickel, that I was to take 3 cents and buy a loaf of bread, then take the remaining 2 cents and buy a lily, and give it to my wife. I would like to report that I have faithfully done that for almost 15 years. You also counseled us to be productive, and I would report that we have 6 beautiful kids. I might also report that the church is still true in our lives. The church must be a little more true here in the Northwest, as we can hardly house our people. The biggest problem we seem to have is keeping up with the growth. Thank you for your example to us and for your words of counsel you gave to us some 14 years ago. May the Lord's choicest blessings continue to be yours sincerely, Dennis Sampson, Bishop." I wrote that on February 17th, and I received a letter back that he had written back to me on February 20th, 1981. "Dear Bishop Sampson, thank you for your lovely letter of February 17th, which I have read with interest. I am happy to know that I had the privilege of performing your marriage and that you are trying to live up to the counsel and advice I gave you at that time, that you have 6 children. Your story about part for bread and part for flowers really goes this way. A Chinese proverb: if you only earn a dime, spend a nickel of it for bread and the other nickel for a lily. I think that adds so much happiness in life. Naturally, I am thrilled to know that you are the bishop of your ward and that the work is going so that your building is crowded. Keep up the good work. You are building a noble foundation, and it will pay you great dividends ultimately through your faith and faithfulness. Give my love to Sister Sampson and your children. Thank you for your letter. Affectionately, your brother, Elder LeGrand Richards." And then you can see his signature there was about as flowery as his speech. Okay, this here is a copy of my grades for my master's degree, and A minus B, A, B, B plus, B, A minus B, A, C plus, A minus, B, A, B, A. If you'll notice right there, my GPA for a master's degree is 3.49. And the way I do math, that means that's a B plus. At least a strong B plus.